Hi, I'm Ken Alling, founder of MELD. In this video, we're going to go over what supplying and borrowing is, how it works, and what is unique about the MELD blockchain's supplying and borrowing protocol. So to start, what we're going to talk about is what is supplying and borrowing and how does it work. So to start with, MELD started out as a supplying and borrowing protocol and then eventually moved and added the blockchain part to it. So this is kind of the core of what it is that we do. So here we have our supplying and borrowing protocol, and there are three different types of people or users that participate. So first, you have a supplier. So this is a person that supplies an asset to the protocol. And then you have a borrower. This is a person that is borrowing an asset from the protocol. These can be the same people, right? So when you supply an asset to the protocol, you will then generate a yield, say 3%. And when you borrow from it, you have to pay an interest rate, say 5%. So these are the two majors that you're familiar with, a person that supplies and a person that borrows. So the third person, or the third user, is a liquidator. And so what happens in this situation, let's say I'm the user, I'm supplying 100 of something. I'm then allowed to borrow about 50% of that. So I can borrow a dollar amount of about 50% of that. So let's say this represents $1,000 of whatever it is, whatever token. I can then borrow $500 worth of that asset. The trick is that if the thing that you've borrowed, if the value of that goes up, but the thing that you've supplied does not, so if this red goes up and it gets close to here, then you end up getting liquidated. What that means is that your loan is terminated. You don't default on your loan. Your loan is terminated. Someone else pays back your loan and gets this collateral. So that someone is a liquidator. So the liquidator, they pay back the loan and they get the collateral. So with this type of a system, this is not centralized. So there's no centralized entity that runs it. Everything here is smart contract based, and the logic is built into the smart contract, allowing people to take their assets and lock it into it and then get a yield, to borrow based on their assets and then pay an interest. And if these things get to the point where they're not in balance anymore, then a liquidator is free to liquidate that position. And so the liquidator, it's not a specific person, it's anybody in the space. So with this type of a supplying and borrowing architecture, you can be a supplier, you can be a borrower, and you can be a liquidator all the same. And everybody benefits from the system. So the supplier, they generate a yield from that supplied assets. The borrower is given the right to borrow against their collateral, borrow against their assets, and that's the benefit that they get. And the liquidator makes sure that no debt is created in the system, because if this red box goes up above the green one, then debt is created. And we don't want debt. Debt is bad. So the liquidator's responsibility is to make sure that the system stays in balance. And so these can be all the same people, and all of them benefit from this type of a system. So that's how supplying and borrowing works. Now, MELD has a bit of unique characteristics to the way that our supplying and borrowing works. So we have the supplier, right? Oops. There we go. The supplier is supplying an asset. They're generating a yield, let's say 3%. The borrower is borrowing the asset. They're paying an interest. say 5%. But in addition to that, MELD is multi-chain. So anybody who is on a different chain and decides to bridge over their tokens, Ethereum, Avalanche, Cardano, when you bridge your tokens over to the MELD blockchain, then on the bridge, we have a bit of a unique characteristic where the tokens that have been locked up on this side, they're put into a native staking pool and they start generating yield. So if you bring Ethereum or ADA onto the MELD blockchain, it will automatically start and generate yield. And that yield then goes directly into the supplying and borrowing protocol. So let's say this is 4%, okay? So if I'm a person that has bridged that asset over and I supply it here, then no longer am I earning 3%. Now I'm going to earn 3% plus 4%. And this we call a yield boost. So all the assets, either in supplying and borrowing or being bridged over, they're not laying there doing nothing. They're being used very efficiently to be able to generate a yield for the participants in the system. So what this also means is if you're supplying, it's very likely that you're going to be generating a much higher yield on your supplied asset than what you're going to borrow. And in that case, your net interest is going to be positive. So that's kind of on the crypto side. But in addition to that, MELD, for many years now, have been working very hard on our banking stack and building banking technology and banking rails to be able to connect supplying and borrowing to banking services. So what that means is now a user can supply an asset, they get their yield, but they can actually borrow dollars against that. They can borrow fiat currency against their crypto, and then they can pay it off or they can use it for however they want to. You can't supply fiat into the system. You can't use fiat as collateral, but you can supply crypto as collateral and then borrow fiat against that. So this is also a key characteristic in the MELD ecosystem and how it works. And so finally, we have this special loan type called a genius loan. And what a genius loan is it takes the yield you're generating when you're supplying, and it pays down the interest on your loan. So it does this automatically, meaning that you have a self-paying loan. So with this, we have several different unique characteristics in a traditional supplying and borrowing ecosystem. You have a yield boost coming from yield on other multiple blockchains. You have the ability to supply and borrow like normal, and you can actually supply crypto and borrow fiat against it. So we think that this is the most exciting and most optimal supplying and borrowing protocol out there. It's built natively into our layer 1 blockchain. And I invite everybody to come and give it a try and see what you think. Thank you very much, and look forward to speaking to you on another video.